In this video, we're going to take a look at two particular tools, the black and white tool and the brightness and contrast tool. Where you might use black and white is if you have drawings that are done completely in black pen or Sharpie marker. This comes to be a really helpful tool when you've got work that's done in that media on white paper. Because regardless of how the light has been when you've shot it, you can always see if putting it in the black and white tool can actually help automatically bring up its brightness and contrast and kind of fix the overall temperature of the color. So let's take a look at it. So for image, as always, going to image adjustments, and let's first go to black and white. Okay, now before I do that, take a look at this right here. Because of the way that the lighting was, we took a photo of this and it really kind of turned out to be a little bit too warm, right? You can see that there's kind of a slight grayish or almost greenish tone to the white of the paper. And we want to see if we can try to change that. So we go to image, adjustments. Let's see what happens if we put it in black and white. Okay, well, suddenly we've now got it to be a much brighter white than what we had before, but you can tell that the white is still not really too bright, and we're probably going to need to work on the contrast quite a bit. But just putting it in that black and white for a Sharpie or pen and ink drawing done on white paper can make a huge difference. Now I could play around with that tool, but I think it's easier just to show you a few things right now with brightness and contrast. So now that I have it in here, what I'm going to do is actually try to take a look and see. Well, let's go to image here, adjustments, and brightness and contrast. Sorry, I forgot where it was there for a second. Okay. Brightness and contrast is going to be something that you're going to be working with where you're looking specifically at how bright the whites or light areas are and how deep and rich the darks are going to be for contrast. It's not exactly the same thing as exposure, even though some people think that it is. But what we're really looking at is whether or not our deep, deep, rich darks are going to have a great tonal range or if they're going to be nice and rich and black and velvety, and whether or not our brightness or our light areas is going to be something that's going to be really nice and light and not overly like a hot spot, but something that's going to have like a nice balance to it. Okay, so if I look over here for brightness, I can start kind of playing around with that tool, and automatically I can see that my white is going to come up a little bit more. But what you have to notice is in this area here, and if you look really carefully, you can see it. The more I turn up that brightness, the more detail I start to lose. So then you have to be really careful about using brightness and contrast, because if you do it too much, you're really going to end up losing some of those really nice details. So it might come into being that I don't need to use brightness and contrast for here. I might actually decide to use something like a levels or a curves in order to adjust my exposure a little bit more. That might be a better idea for me. Okay. I can seem to use the contrast a little bit because that seems to be okay without necessarily losing some of the nice details that I have in here and bringing out some of the richness of the darks and a little bit more of the lightness and brightness of the whites. But again, you have to make that decision and look very carefully at all the small details to make sure that you're not going to be losing them.